Biggest thing you need to see to make an investment?
Two things. They are one of a few or one of one. The other most common part of this is
Meet Mark, a partner at Greycroft Ventures. They're a $4 billion fund, and he's been investing since the mid-90s, and he says that this is the most
exciting time in my entire career to do investing right now.
I talked to too many founders who meet with a VC. They think the pitch went well. The VC says that they're interested, but after the meeting, it's crickets. Why is that?
I remember when I was raising money, I was always like, well, they're just not telling me what's really wrong. It's not usually why people are actually doing that. I think actually people will generally tell you if they have an issue. Usually what's happening there is genuine interest. And then in most cases, there are just
What sectors are you most excited about investing in right now?
business processes that enterprises need to do but aren't strategic, payment processing or call center. So today we believe intelligent software is going to come at those processes and do it at like a fraction of the cost with more intelligence.
He shares the most effective way to get a meeting with him or almost any VC.
That's a meeting I'll take every time, even if it ends up not being quite the right fit for us or whatever. Like I'll almost blindly just take a 30-minute call.
My name's Adam O'Donnell. This is the Founder Initiative. Let's go. Before we even get into some of the most exciting things around founder investor fit and some juicy questions, could you just tell us a little bit about just how long you've been at Greycroft and what the firm like focuses on?
We invest out of 3 different strategies. We have a software team, which is the team that I spend all my time on. I've been at Greycroft for about 14 years.
What is an email example that you would just like not be able to not respond to?
So it's really 2 things, right? It's kind of their story and kind of how they would portray their founder market fit and their excellence, like in that respect, right? Like why are they uniquely qualified to pursue this mission that they're taking out to do? And the better that we can understand because of their qualifications, their insights, their previous experiences, that they are one of a few or one of one in the world that could go do that. Like that's the hook. I would say the other, I think most common part of this is most firms like ours do a fair amount of thematic work where we're looking at certain areas that we think are really interesting based on these big mega trends that are going on. And we do a fair amount of work in those areas. And then we're actually reasonably outbound in those areas, trying to find companies that we think fit the criteria that we're looking for. So as part of that outbound reach, besides your excellence around your founder market fit, if you can also, like if you land in an area that we're also already looking in, which would be hard to know as a founder, but that's where you'll get like really fast response from any venture fund. If you're amazing and it happens to land in an area that we're already digging, and those are the ones that get like really quick reaction.
You feel comfortable sharing one that's like more on the public side right now?
So this one I wouldn't say is yet on the public side, but one of the ones that I'm personally very interested in is what I'm calling like intelligent RPA. So these are like business processes that enterprises need to do but aren't necessarily strategic. So think of like payment processing or call center support. These are businesses that historically companies would have either built big in-house teams to do it and then increasingly started outsourcing to maybe the IBMs of the world or the Accentures or offshore to India for like a call center or some sort of offshoring model. Today, we believe intelligent software is going to come at those processes and do it at like a fraction of the cost with more intelligence. And so we're looking at both horizontal as well as in verticals that do that. And you can think of like, instead of having offshore people learning how to do these things, you just now have like intelligent software agents that are doing it on your behalf. And they work 24/7. They know every language. They never get tired. You don't have to retrain them. They don't leave. And like, you can see why it's going to work long-term.
Yeah, that got me excited. And just to tie in on that one, what's the example of like the perfect founder in that one? And I know it's going to depend on the sector.
Yeah, it would be so for us at Greycroft, what we think about first and foremost is really strong technical background in more of the infrastructure space. It can even be like someone who's pretty deeply involved in the research side, but certainly a team that has the ability to technically scale and build a product to serve a large market. So somebody that's effectively shipped product, even if it's obviously cloud-based, and delivered continuous feature improvement. So we look for that strong technical underpinning, both on the research and the product and like shipping side. And then in addition to that, obviously, whether that's inherent initially as a small, pre-seed company or over time as it grows, like a really strong go-to-market team as well that can really think through how to deliver that value proposition out to customers repeatably and then at scale.
Let's just think of like a hypothetical example.
Because a lot of times the application layer folks come out of more of like a business process mentality, right? So they might have been at like Workday, for example, or maybe they were at Accenture or an Indian BPO doing HR outsourcing or something where they deeply understand the customer problem, the workflows and the work processes that are happening, the other systems that it's integrated to, like they kind of understand that world, right? On the infrastructure side, it can often be someone who was more of a researcher, like, coming out of Facebook, or maybe it was Hugging Face or what, like, or, like different levels of understanding like the models themselves and where they're going. The profiles could be a little bit different, but typically it looks like that. And what we really want is, besides that real vision, we want to see an ability to attract exceptional technical talent right around them, because that magnetic ability to attract talent really defines which companies can break out and scale. And then like a relentless ability to like urgently ship product like that. Those are the ones that really seem to things iterate faster. And the fifth version of the product is almost always going to be better than somebody's first version. So if you can just go really fast, right, you can generally out execute.
So say I am that founder. If I cold outreach to you, it's probably not the wisest thing from my experience, just quickly as a VC at a fund here, where like 0% of the investments we had made were actually cold outreach. Warm referrals are usually the best. But I'm curious if you could tell me in the past, like say 3 deals that you invested in, do you remember the source that you found those deals? And you can just talk categorically to really reinforce the best channel for founders to reach out to you.
So in a couple of cases, they were deals that we were already like had tracked the talent and were kind of building relationship and looking for. I would say the other one came in from one of our founders, who we'd already backed, who knew the team, just said these guys are excellent. Like we would hire these guys if we could, but they wanted to start their own company. You really need to meet with these guys. And fortunately for us, they also gave us a great endorsement saying, hey, Greycroft's been an awesome trusted partner. They've been amazing to work with so far. We think you would really like them too. And so that's the perfect scenario, because then we had a warm intro to them, and then they also had heard already some of the things that we think are, magical about our firm, but that not the whole world understands unless you work closely with us too. And so with that, in that case, it was kind of like that's kind of like the perfect scenario for both of us. But in that case, it ended up being a match.
I love that. And like, I've heard that consistently. I think that was on the last episode with VJ, that you go in and if you get a founder that you've already invested in to make an intro, you almost have to take that. I think he said
that's a meeting I'll take every time, even if it ends up not being quite the right fit for us or whatever. Like I'll almost blindly just take a 30-minute call, just because I think so highly of that founder that I can't wait to meet somebody that they think is awesome, even if it ends up not being a perfect fit on that one.
That's gold. That is, I hope everyone's taken away that. And the last question around that is like, what stage did you meet those companies? Say like the last 3 that you invested in, were they like just an idea, or?
The first one was just getting incorporated and kind of setting up, and we were an investor in the seed round, and then we led the A round. So we already had started working with the team pretty closely, and then we effectively kind of went to them when they were ready to think about raising an A round. We went and made them an offer, although they did, still, because they already had a few other investors in the firm, they did talk to a few folks, but, after a bit of time, kind of felt like we were where they wanted to be. And that was awesome. So and then the other one was a bit more competitive, because we got that intro, and even though it was really warm, we were kind of building that relationship from the very first, step for that first meeting. But ultimately they similarly felt at the end of the process that we were the right partner for them.
I love that. And so it's not, it's too early to be talking to you when you just have an idea. Like it's just not worth everyone's time.
No, we're psyched, but usually that comes from an intro of someone that we would know, or that thematic work that we're doing, tracking some of those founders, leads us to kind of reach out to them or get connected to them somehow at a conference or something like that, where we're building that relationship and there's some chemistry that quickly develops. But we're like an active seed investor, so we want to meet them as early as we can. But I would say over the history of our firm, like that late seed Series A deal is also like a great place for us to get started. And
All right, we're about to go through some rapid fire questions. Those questions that you might be thinking to ask a VC, but you might not have. I'm a founder who's met with you once, and at the end of the conversation, you were like, "Hey, like we're interested." Like you seemed excited in the pitch conversation that we had, the 30-minute conversation, but now you're not giving me any commitments, and I kind of maybe pinged you a couple of times, but it just feels like crickets. But yet you seemed interested in the pitch.
usually what's happening there is genuine interest initially. And then either in most cases, there are just other competing interests that are ending up at that point as a higher priority. It's not always like another deal. It could be like I have a board meeting or one of my companies I'm on the board of is trying to acquire another company. In a perfect world, there'd be some transparent communication. But I remember when I was raising money, I was always like, well, they're just not telling me what's really wrong. That's not usually why people are actually doing that. I think actually people will generally tell you if they have an issue around the market size or whatever. Um, I think it's usually like truly like, we're running a business and we have a bunch of other competing demands, and it's just kind of a time management issue.
Yeah. But I just, to be really honest, like it to me, like when I was in venture, it seems like the crux of it though is like either maybe you are interested in the company, but it's just like not right now.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
like there's got to be that like
It is. I mean, I think that's generally correct. I think there's a sense that it's interesting, but it isn't going to become my number one priority that I'm going to drop everything else to run after. And the reality is like most deals, if they don't get to that level of urgency for an investor, that won't happen. And your other podcast that you just did, he talked about creating FOMO and like there's like a momentum to deals. Like the more founders can do to kind of create that, it helps on that. But even in those circumstances, like I'm only going to do one or two deals a year. So like if it's not the right time for me, it does not always mean it's not an incredible business. It probably doesn't mean that at all. It just often just means the connection in that moment didn't quite work for whatever reason.
The next one, we didn't get to a term sheet, but we had multiple meetings. It seemed like things were going well, and then you said no, or basically said not now. When I asked you around like more details, you were kind of sheepish about going into like more details on like really the reason why you weren't going to invest.
Either there's some structural problem about the market size or the growth rate or the valuation or something that's kind of like an objective thing. We could disagree on the data, right? But there's some, and usually guys are great. At least I think we're pretty good about sharing like, hey, you know what, like the valuation is just too high at this part for us to underwrite it, or we just can't get past the market size at least that's available. The tricky one that I think is the one that people dodge often is if that like founder market fit's not as obvious and they're not necessarily thinking the team is quite over the bar for what they're shooting for. That's a trickier message to deliver back, just saying, we're not, like, for obvious reasons. So I think that's probably the one that gets ducked more than the other ones, I think.
It's like, hey, we just don't think you're going to be one of the top three.
Yeah, and again, like that doesn't mean that the business isn't going to be wildly successful. We all have a bigger anti-portfolio than we do a portfolio, right? And there's just got to be some thing at assessment level in our minds in a very fast with not enough data that we have to get to quickly to make these decisions. And we're not always right on that, but it can feel like a very personal thing to a founder. And I think if there's an area that doesn't quite get as bluntly communicated, it's probably that one versus something that's more like, easier to be objective about.
Me as a founder, you're taking us to the investment committee. Like, is it really the committee, or does it come down to the one partner who brought it? Like, who makes the final decision? And
generally speaking, if you're dealing with like one of the more senior partners, they have generally a decent amount of latitude. But if I really pounded the table, could I force the deal through? Probably. I want the feedback from my team. And it's the debate around the deal where the real insights come.
Final question. What keeps you up at night when it comes to sourcing startups?
In a perfect world, I would want to see every amazing founder that's doing something that is really like unique based on their worldview, and one that's looking for a partner like Greycroft who is going to really like, you know, work with them through thick and thin and to try to help them navigate through that whole journey. So like I said before in the marketing challenge, like if every amazing founder in the world that was starting a business kind of understood that that's the type of relationship that we're striving every day to build with our founders, I would hope that they would seek us out and you know have that conversation. So that's kind of a high, you know, like, but that's, you know, I know we're not going to see everything, and there's a bunch of other amazing firms, and I just ultimately want every founder to work with the firm that they click with the most. That's what the juice for us is in this, is to try to help.
This has been amazing. Thank you so much. Reach out to me on LinkedIn, Adam O'Donnell. Also go on YouTube and go to the Founder Initiative or thefounderinitiative.com. This is a community. This is about helping founders hit product market fit, get funded, and stay up to date. Boom.